Hey guys, alright? Welcome everyone. In the year 1959 in Lexington, Massachusetts, we see several children playing in the schoolyard. We also observe a little girl named Lucinda, who looks at the sky, hearing whispers in her head. Teacher Taylor calls everyone inside. She announces that Lucinda is the winner of the Best Idea Award in the class, and Lucinda is surprised and receives applause from everyone. Teacher Taylor then presents the next project for the class, a time capsule, where she explains that everyone will draw a picture showing what the world will be like in 50 years, and children in the future will open the capsule to see the drawings. She gives them some time, but when it's over, Lucinda is still drawing something. As she collects the drawings from the class, the teacher notices that Lucinda was writing several numbers, but with time running out, the teacher collects the drawings, not allowing Lucinda to finish. After that, the school leaders bury the capsule containing the students' drawings, stating that it will be kept there for 50 years. Suspicious of something, Lucinda only observes the ceremony and people storing her drawing. When Taylor looks for her, she realizes that Lucinda has disappeared, so they search for her inside the school. When Taylor opens a pantry, she finds Lucinda scratching the door with her nails, and Lucinda, scared, asks the voices to stop whispering in her head. Then 50 years pass, and we meet John, who is observing the night sky, accompanied by his son Caleb. Caleb asks if they have discovered life outside Earth, and his father says no, but they question the vastness of the universe and the probability of there being life somewhere. Moments later, Caleb goes to his room to watch something, and his father tells him to sleep because tomorrow he will go to school to participate in the 50th anniversary celebration. John talks to Caleb and tries to cheer up his son regarding where his mother might be, emphasizing that Caleb can believe in the sky. We also notice that Caleb wears a hearing aid to help him hear better and sometimes uses sign language. John goes to his office and looks at a still unopened present but doesn't open it. At the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, John is an astrophysics professor and gives a lecture about how things are, explaining that everything is determined and where their exact place is. Then he stands there, lost in thought. When he is asked what he believes, he says that things simply happen and dismisses everyone. A cosmologist and John's friend named Phil arrives and goes with him to talk, inviting him to dinner, but John remembers his son's school ceremony and quickly heads to the school. When he arrives there, he sees his son, and shortly after, the time capsule is unearthed. Moments later, the elderly teacher Taylor distributes the drawings to the students, and Caleb goes to get his own. Then his hearing aid starts receiving strange signals, and whispers begin to echo for him. Caleb has received Lucinda's letter and discovers that it contains hundreds of numbers, and further ahead, he sees a strange person staring at him, but then they quickly disappear. At night, John discovers that his son brought Lucinda's letter, and Caleb says it might mean something, but John asks him to return it to the school the next day. Later, John drinks a little and watches TV. When he goes to the kitchen, he decides to take the letter and, curious about what the numbers might mean, he writes them on a whiteboard. John notices that one of the number sequences refers to the date September 11, 2001. Intrigued by this, John goes to the computer and starts researching more about that date. He also discovers the exact number of deaths in the tragedy, which matches the number indicated in the letter. This piques John's curiosity, so he sacrifices his sleep time and writes down the remaining numbers on the whiteboard. He then starts researching what appear to be historical dates. John discovers that the numbers identify a date when a tragedy occurred, along with the number of deaths. He circles the numbers that match dates, while he is still unsure about the meaning of the others. Realizing this, John knows that the numbers are precise and refer to events that have marked history, and one of them terrifies him. The next day, John leaves Caleb at school and goes to MIT. In an observatory, he shows Phil the numbers, which mark historical events of the past 50 years. Phil questions whether it's just a tasteless prank, but John says that he saw it being unearthed after 50 years, and what he is trying to say is that the next day, 81 people will die. Phil suggests that it might just be coincidental numbers and says that there are many others that mean nothing. Phil tells John that he has been out of his mind ever since he lost his wife. Upset, John gathers his things and leaves. John goes to Mrs. Taylor's house and asks for more information about Lucinda. The lady says that the little girl was always a lonely student, and even on the day of the school celebration 50 years ago, she disappeared for a moment. When they found her, she was scratching a door with her nails, and when asked what was happening, she wouldn't say anything. John asks where he can find Lucinda, but Taylor says that she has already passed away. When John returns home, he tries to gather information about the people from Lucinda's school while Caleb plays outside. Suddenly, a car arrives with two men who call out to the boy and whisper something to him, then hand him what appears to be a dark stone. John, seeing this, runs outside, and Caleb says that they were strange men who gave him something. John finds it strange but doesn't pay much attention to them. Later, John researches Lucinda's death when a young woman startles him. She is Grace, John's sister. She wants to spend some time with Caleb, and John could go out with someone and move on with his life, but he doesn't want to. Grace also talks to John and tells him that he and his son need to visit their family, specifically their father, who is a pastor, and whose views on creation differ from John's. John doesn't want to talk anymore and asks her to leave him alone. However, Grace says that she will pray for him. Later, John watches the news, where several broadcasters talk about solar eruptions that could affect satellites. John waits for the next day to come, continuing to watch the news, hoping to see any news related to the predictions he observed in the numbers. Caleb observes his father for a while, as he continues to watch the news, and the hours pass. The next day, Caleb calls his father, who was exhausted and sleeping, and John goes to pick up his son from school. On the way, there is heavy traffic, so he calls Phil and apologizes for being rude. John says he will accept Phil's dinner invitation to finally meet someone whom he wants to introduce, when suddenly John notices the car's coordinates and, checking the numbers, realizes that the predicted location is nearby. John gets out of the car to check why the traffic is stopped, and further ahead, the guard says it's nothing serious. But frightened, he looks up at the sky, where an airplane is crashing and collides with the ground, causing an explosion. John tries to help the people who are still alive and sees some survivors with their bodies on fire, while others are killed in the explosions. John is completely shocked by what he has just witnessed. Later, at night, he returns home. Grace, knowing what happened, goes to pick up and stay with Caleb. John, still stunned, realizing that there were exactly 81 deaths in the accident, sits down to gather his thoughts. Caleb asks what happened, and John says it was a broken-down car on the road, but Caleb suspects it was something else. Not getting any answers from his father and feeling upset, Caleb goes to his room. John can't sleep and confirms the deaths on the news. Later, Phil comes to his house. John talks to him and shows him the numbers again, this time believing in their significance. Phil doesn't know what it all means, but John says that two events are still to come. Seeing how troubled his friend is, Phil suggests that their scientific minds should forget about the problem. When Phil leaves, we see a strange man observing John's house. Caleb suddenly wakes up and hears whispers. Suddenly, a man slowly enters his room and says something, then points outside, where they see something illuminating around the house. When Caleb goes to see what it is, he observes that everything around him is burnt, even the animals don't escape the fire. John hears screams and rushes to Caleb's room, finding his son terrified in the corner. John also notices the strange man observing them from outside the house and goes after him, but when he gets there, he doesn't see anyone. The next day, following a lead from the newspaper, John goes to Lucinda's residence and sees a woman leaving with a child, so he decides to follow her. She goes to the museum, and once inside, John spots the woman and asks Caleb to go see the prehistoric animals. John approaches the woman, named Diana, and starts a conversation about their children. Diana's daughter is named Abby, and she enjoys talking about animals with Caleb. They leave together while the kids observe the city. John talks to Diana about life, but he doesn't want to waste time and tells her the reason he's there. He asks her about his mother Lucinda and questions Diana if her mother had any special abilities. Diana finds it strange, so John tries to explain to her what he thinks her mother knew. Finding John peculiar, she calls her daughter to leave, but John follows her, telling her that he followed her mother's predictions and witnessed the tragedy of the previous day. John also reveals that more people will die in the following days. She doesn't pay attention and leaves with her daughter. Suspecting that his son might be in danger, John returns home and arms himself. He hears on the news that an attack on a city on the East Coast may happen in the coming days, and meanwhile, several strange men keep observing John's house. He looks at the numbers and the prediction of the location, discovering that it will be in New York. He then calls the authorities of the city and alerts them about the attack's location. Worried about the situation, he leaves his son at his sister's house, and while saying goodbye to her, he asks her not to let Caleb watch the news. John heads to New York, and shortly after, he goes to the coordinates location and realizes that it's crowded with people, showing that the authorities didn't heed the request to close the intersection. Thinking that John could be the terrorist, agents are on high alert, so John runs to the subway, where the flow of people is even greater. Arriving in the underground where the trains pass, John looks for a suspect who might be carrying a bomb. He follows a man who starts running when he sees him, and John tries to catch up. A police officer sees the two running and alerts the others. The man enters a train, and John continues to follow him, but before proceeding, he asks a woman carrying a baby to exit the train. The man is cornered, as is John, by the police, but John says it's the other man they should arrest. When the man turns around, all he had stolen were DVDs. Meanwhile, a train from the nearby station is approaching, and due to track problems, it veers onto the track of the station where John is. The train derails and comes uncontrollably towards them. John and the people try to escape in a hurry, but the disaster has already occurred. The runaway train collides with John's train, and he protects the woman. Then it invades the subway, destroying the place, running over and killing dozens of people. John exits the subway frustrated for not being able to prevent the tragedy, where once again the prediction was correct. When John returns home with Caleb, he sees Diana and her daughter waiting for them outside. Diana shows concern about the events and tells John that one of the dates he mentioned for the tragedies, her mother had said that she would also die. They then get into the car and drive to a location. Along the way, Diana is surprised by what her mother wrote and wonders if someone can predict the future. John talks about his wife's death in a building where many died, and after that day, he no longer believes that anyone can know what will happen and that life is just a sequence of random errors and accidents. He says that if he had the list beforehand, he could have saved her life. When they arrive, it is revealed to be Lucinda's old abandoned house. The children stay in the car sleeping, and they proceed to enter the house. But before they do, Diana notices that at the end of the letter, it's not the number 33, but initials, E, because sometimes her mother wrote the letters reversed. Diana says that her mother died of an overdose when she was 9 years old and never returned there after that. She also tells that her mother used to hear voices that said horrible things to her, so her father came and took her away from Lucinda because he thought her mother was sick. Diana explains that her mother moved there to prepare for something. In one of the rooms of the house, they find several newspaper clippings showing the tragedies that had occurred. John finds a drawing, and Diana says that her mother would stare at it for hours. It is a drawing depicting a man receiving something from a deity, and beside it, there are strange creatures and a celestial globe of some sort. John continues to search the house and enters Lucinda's room, accidentally stepping on a stone similar to the one Caleb received from the strange men. At that moment, Caleb wakes up and notices men approaching them from outside the car. He wakes up Abby, who also sees them. John finds more stones beneath the bed and, intrigued, decides to lift it. When he reads what is written, he is surprised to discover that the initials E stood for everyone else. It wasn't just a name, it referred to all of humanity. Meanwhile, the strange men approach the car, whispering to Caleb and Abby, calling them to go with them. Abby opens the door to leave, but Caleb, sensing the danger, honks the car horn, attracting John's attention, who quickly goes to them. However, when he arrives, there is no one there, only the two children. John asks what happened, and Caleb says that the men were there. Abby says that they said that two of them could go with them if they wanted. Diana asks who they are, and Abby replies that they are the whispering beings. John, seeing one of them in the woods, grabs his gun and decides to chase after him. John runs quickly and manages to catch up with the being. He asks what he wanted with his son, and when the being turns around, we see that it has a human face, but when it opens its mouth, a bright light blinds John, and then he no longer sees anyone. Upon returning home, John and Diana question the meaning of the initials E and why Lucinda didn't write any more dates. It meant that the end would come for everyone. Diana is confused and scared at the same time because her mother somehow knew all those dates and even the possible end of everything, which would be the next day. John is not surprised because so far, all of Lucinda's predictions have come true with precision. Fearing the worst, Diana goes to bed to be with her daughter, and John does the same. The next day, John offers breakfast to Abby when he notices the drawing she was holding and realizes that it is similar to the one Lucinda drew, with the celestial being and the sun in the center. John, thinking about something, calls Diana to go with him to an observatory. Upon arriving, he reunites with his friend Phil and discusses what he has discovered. Reviewing the files and data on solar eruptions, John states that they were wrong about the magnitude of such an event. By inputting new data, they discovered that a massive solar eruption is going to occur, bathing the Earth in intense radiation and destroying the ozone layer, leading to devastating consequences. They are shocked by what is about to happen, and as John looks at the sun, he questions why he received the numbers and predictions when he cannot do anything to prevent such an event. John returns home and instructs everyone to prepare supplies and clothes. However, when Caleb goes up to his room, he starts hearing whispers. John goes to his room and takes the gift he had been keeping, a photo of his family before losing his wife, reminiscing about her. He calls his father, whom he hasn't spoken to in a long time, and discusses a biblical topic his father used to preach to him when he was younger, the gifts of the Spirit, including the gift of prophecy. John states that he has a prophecy and asks his father to listen. He explains that the heat they are experiencing will not improve, but rather worsen. He asks his parents to go as deep into the earth as they can, even though he doesn't know if it will make a difference. However, his father refuses to go anywhere and declares himself ready for when God calls him. Suddenly, the call disconnects and John goes to fetch his son to leave. When he enters the room, he notices Caleb drawing and writing more numbers. Worried, John makes him stop and come back to his senses. Suspecting something, John goes to Lucinda's school and removes the door she had scratched with her nails. Upon returning home, he tells Diana that Lucinda knew the coordinates of the last event and tried to write them down but was interrupted. He attempts to remove the paint to uncover the message, but Diana, concerned and thinking that John is wasting time, takes Abby and Caleb and leaves in her car. When John discovers the coordinates, he goes to talk to Diana, but she has already left. Desperate, John gets into his car and goes in search of them. On the road, Diana says they are heading to a safe place, but Abby says that the whispering men know where they are because they speak in their minds. This frightens Diana and nearly causes an accident. Moments later, she stops at a gas station to refuel and hears a live broadcast on the news urging people to take shelter due to the solar eruptions causing extreme heat. Caleb gets out of the car and calls his father, informing him that they are at a gas station. Diana comes out and sees him on the phone, so she takes the phone and talks to John. He tells her that he has discovered the location of the last coordinates Lucinda wrote, which is near her old house, believing that it might actually be the only safe place. However, she is frightened and doesn't want to go there, opting for the caves instead. Nevertheless, John explains that the caves won't solve anything because the radiation will penetrate over 1.5 kilometers below the Earth's surface, making escape impossible. John asks her to wait and take the risk of going together to the coordinates, but Diana, fearful, refuses. Then she notices a stone on top of the phone, puzzled by its presence. Meanwhile, Caleb and Abby are taken away by the whispering beings. Upon witnessing this, Diana drops the phone and runs out, in which, seeing that she needs to do something soon, she gets into another car and follows the men at high speed. She fails to stop at an intersection, causing a truck to collide with her car. The children wonder where Diana went, and the whispering beings reveal to them that she won't come with them. John arrives at the accident scene, and on the horizon, the strange sky is already visible. He goes to see what happened and discovers in the ambulance that Diana died exactly at midnight, on the day predicted by her mother. He grieves and realizes that she was carrying a stone, understanding its meaning and who gave it to her. He arms himself and goes to Lucinda's house. Upon arriving, he ventures deeper into the forest, gets out of the car, and notices that the place is filled with the same stones given to his son. John continues moving forward and finds Diana's car. He gets out of the car, and further ahead, he finds the man and threatens him to tell him where Caleb is. But soon, his son appears, carrying a rabbit, and John feels relieved. Abby also shows up, and John wants to take them away, but Caleb says they need to go with the whispering beings because they only wanted what was best for them. They had sent the messages to prepare them for when they came to fetch them. John asks who they are, and suddenly something begins to appear above them, a huge, radiant globe, something celestial. Caleb tells his father that they have come to take them so they can start anew. As they approach to enter the globe, one of the beings stops John and tells Caleb that only the chosen ones can go, only those who heard the calling. John becomes sad because he realizes he cannot go with his son. Lamenting, he says that he cannot go with Caleb and tells him to be strong and take care of Abby. Caleb is saddened because he doesn't want to go without his father, but John, believing in a new future, comforts him, saying that they will soon be together with their mother. Caleb then decides to go with the beings who, after fulfilling their purpose on Earth, transform into their original form, their bodies shining brightly. John sees his son one last time before he is taken away in the celestial globe. Soon, it becomes apparent that many other celestial globes, like shining spaceships, emerge from the Earth, rescuing more chosen ones and then heading to another place in the universe. John, who remains on Earth, feels anguish at being separated from his son and eventually falls asleep there. As dawn breaks, he returns to the city and notices that the heat has increased. On the streets, people struggle to acquire their supplies, unaware that the end is approaching for everyone. John goes to his parents' house, and upon seeing him, he embraces them timidly, receiving a warm welcome. His father tells him that it is not yet the end, and after everything he has experienced, John believes his words. The family embraces, awaiting the imminent end. A massive cloud of heat sweeps across, signifying that the solar eruption has penetrated the planet, destroying everything and killing everyone, ultimately wiping out everything on the planet. In another safe place, we see Caleb and Abby being left on a planet. We also see the other globes that brought the chosen ones. The movie ends with Caleb and Abby happily running towards a beautiful tree, ready to start anew.